What if I told you that the person who caused you the deepest pain remembers every detail of what they did? Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." But what Jung didn't say is just as important. What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you assumed about those who refuse to admit their mistakes. In the end, you'll understand why some people can sleep peacefully at night while you lie awake, replaying every scene, every word, every expression of pain on your face over and over again. Nights when you repeat the pain in an endless loop while the one who caused it sleeps deeply, as if nothing ever happened. Write 1 in the comments if you've ever felt that imbalance, and write 12 if you've learned to let go and reclaim your peace. Let me start with a disturbing truth. They remember everything. The one who broke your trust, who made you doubt your own reality, who made you think you were losing your mind, remembers every detail, every word, every broken promise, every moment they saw you collapse under the weight of their betrayal is firmly engraved in their memory. According to Jung's groundbreaking theory of the shadow, each of us carries parts of ourselves we would rather repress. The more we suppress these unwanted truths, the stronger they become. And this is where it gets dark. Those who hurt you don't forget. Instead, they do something far more deliberate, what Jung called shadow projection, the unconscious act of rejecting one's own darkness and placing it onto someone else. And here's something even more unsettling. If you've ever wondered how someone can destroy your inner peace and then act as if nothing happened, what comes next will change your understanding of human nature. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But what happens when someone refuses to be transformed? When they choose comfort over consciousness, repression over growth? They don't forget. They choose to, because to remember would mean taking responsibility. And responsibility, as Jung taught, is the most terrifying task of all, true transformation. As he once wrote in a letter, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The people who hurt you have built their entire identity around escaping this fear. They've created complex psychological defenses to avoid the only thing that could actually set them free. Instead, they've become addicted to comfort, to ego protection, to repression, dressed up in phrases like, "Well, that's not how it happened," or "You're just too sensitive." How do you react when someone deflects responsibility and shifts the blame onto you? Write 1 if, in those moments, you start questioning yourself. Write 2 if you immediately recognize it as a defense mechanism. Jung discovered that the human mind goes to extreme lengths to protect its self-image. He called this the persona, a mask we hide behind, not only from the world, but from ourselves. When someone harms you and then acts as though nothing happened, they're not just deceiving you, they're upholding what Jung called the provisional life, a psychic state in which a person avoids the difficult path toward their truth, clings to comfort, justifies themselves, and insists on their innocence. And here is the unsettling part. This should make you reconsider every encounter with someone who never admits their mistakes. Jung said, "What you resist persists." But he also discovered something darker. Some people become experts at disguising their inner resistance as your burden. When someone hurts you and then acts like nothing happened, they are not only protecting themselves, they are actively destabilizing you. They make you doubt your memory, your emotions, your very sense of reality. You begin to wonder, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I overreacted, maybe I'm being dramatic. And this is where the real damage begins. Jung's research on psychological manipulation shows this happens when someone's shadow collides with accountability. Instead of remorse, they resort to evasion. Instead of making amends, they project blame, leaving you to question whether your pain was even real. Jung called this psychological projection. Modern psychology goes further and names it gaslighting. It's a tactic designed to make you doubt your own reality. To preserve their fragile self-image, Carl Jung uncovered a powerful truth about human nature. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But some people have chosen a different privilege, the privilege of avoiding growth entirely by perfecting silence as a strategic weapon. Their silence is neither accidental nor passive. It is not true silence at all, but a calculated tool. What I'm about to explain will shed light on why you felt so confused, so mentally exhausted, so desperate for closure that never comes. And it will help you understand why their power seems to grow the weaker you feel, especially when they disappear into silence after causing you pain. This silence is not an empty space, it's a form of control. Jung wrote extensively about the power games that unfold in human relationships. He noticed something often overlooked. Silence shifts the weight of confusion onto the one who is already suffering. Think about it. When they remain silent, you begin to fill in the gaps. You replay every interaction in your mind, analyze your feelings in detail, doubt your reactions, and cling to the hope of an answer that never comes. You search in every word, every gesture, every glance for a sign of remorse that doesn't exist. This is not by accident, it is their strategy. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart." Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Yet these very people build their entire identity on outward projection. They force you to carry their unacknowledged guilt while they move on unscathed, leaving you with the full emotional burden. According to Jung's research on unconscious competence, some people develop a remarkable ability for emotional manipulation without even realizing it. They refine an instinct to shift emotional responsibility onto others, sparing themselves from the consequences of their actions. And here lies the most shocking truth about those who weaponize silence. An insight from Jung's most controversial studies that exposes the core of this behavior. Jung discovered that when silence is used deliberately, it fosters what he called psychological dependency. The longer they withhold the answer you hope for, the stronger your craving becomes for any sign of acknowledgement. That craving plays perfectly into their hands. It puts you in a vulnerable position where you begin chasing after them, softening your boundaries, straying from your own truth, just to get some kind of reaction. You catch yourself feeling grateful for the smallest signs of attention from the very person who should be asking for your forgiveness. Jung once said, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." But those who weaponize silence have learned an even more insidious trick. They make you fear your own space of self-respect by trapping your attention in the emptiness of their silence and non-response. In his influential work on the collective unconscious, Jung explained that humanity shares universal archetypal patterns. One of the most destructive is the archetype of the innocent, the part of the psyche that denies its capacity to cause harm. But Jung made an even more disturbing discovery. Some people don't just encounter this archetype occasionally, they live permanently inside it. For them, innocence becomes their entire identity, making it impossible to ever admit guilt. What may surprise you, in his work with particularly difficult patients, Jung discovered an insight that redefines our understanding of responsibility. He found that people who systematically avoid accountability develop an unconscious competence in emotional manipulation. They don't just hurt others by accident and then forget. It becomes a perfected ability to cause harm while simultaneously shielding themselves from every consequence. Jung's clinical notes describe these people as acting under psychological inflation, a state where the ego is so overblown it cannot accept any information that threatens its self-image. To demand accountability from such a person is not merely to ask for an apology, it is to dismantle their entire inflated identity. That is why they are unable to stay present in conflict, in emotional intensity, or when confronted with responsibility. Their pattern is clear. They withdraw, go silent, change the subject, post artificially positive messages on social media, or seek out people who will confirm their version of events. This is not simple overwhelm, it is a consistent, calculated strategy. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. These people have not brought their destructive tendencies into awareness, but turned them into systematic, predictable, and deeply harmful patterns. Yet there is an even darker dimension. Jung's studies in complex psychology reveal how such people can even live with themselves. He devoted years to studying psychological complexes, autonomous clusters of thoughts, feelings, and memories operating outside of consciousness. But his insights went further. He found that people who repeatedly avoid responsibility don't just possess complexes, they develop a dissociative competence. They can split their actions so completely from their identity that they genuinely believe they bear no responsibility for the harm they cause. They don't forget the damage, they convince themselves they had no choice, that you forced them, that they were the real victim. Their psychological defenses are so refined that they rewrite events in real time, casting themselves as the hero in stories where they were, in truth, the perpetrator. This is painful because the reality becomes so twisted that you start doubting your own memory and your feelings. Write 1 if you've ever been caught in this distortion. Write I's if you've learned to stand firmly in your truth. Jung wrote, "The most dangerous thing is to live in a world of projections." These people don't just live in projections, they construct an entire reality from them, one in which they are always right, always justified, always misunderstood. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But true emotional maturity requires courage, the courage to face one's own capacity to harm others. This is exactly where they fail, and why those who cannot process guilt will hurt you again and again. The most revealing point is why some people are simply incapable of giving a sincere apology. Jung's research on shadow integration exposes the unsettling truth. When guilt is processed in a healthy way, it becomes a guide. It is the inner voice that says, "Something I did hurt someone I care about, and I need to make it right." Jung called this the moral function of the unconscious, the part of the psyche that seeks balance, justice, and healing. But for those who lack emotional maturity, guilt is not experienced as a guide, but as an attack, as a threat to their very being. Jung showed in his work with patients who refused responsibility. For them, admitting a mistake does not mean "I made a mistake." It means "I am a mistake." That kind of inner collapse would be too dangerous for their fragile self-image. That is why they avoid growth and make you the problem. Instead of confronting their own shadow, they project it onto you. Instead of doing the work of integration, they retreat into the comfort of denial. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." But these people choose the opposite path. They keep their darkness unconscious and force you to carry it. Jung recognized something crucial about those who permanently avoid their own shadow. His observations explain why a gentle confrontation with their behavior can suddenly feel like a battle you never started. He identified the ego's defense mechanisms as strategies the mind uses to shield itself from threatening truths. But he also discovered that some people don't just use these defenses in moments of stress. They build their entire lives around them. To demand responsibility from someone whose whole identity is built on avoiding it is not simply to ask for an apology, it is to ask them to dismantle the very foundation of their psychological existence. Jung's clinical notes reveal that such people do not experience your suffering as information, but as an attack. Your desire for understanding feels to them like a declaration of war, your vulnerability like a weakness to exploit, and your truth like an enemy to defeat. Jung found that these individuals invest so much energy into protecting their ego that they lose access to their empathy. They cannot sit with your pain because they have never learned to sit with their own. Jung called this psychological rigidity, a stubborn inability to adapt, to grow, or to change when confronted with new information. Thus, they remain trapped in what he called the provisional life, an endless flight from the path toward their true self. One of his most important insights into emotional development explains why you keep expecting depth from people who can only function on a surface level. Jung recognized that not all people are at the same stage of emotional development. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances." But what happens when one of those substances is emotionally inert? His developmental psychology shows that some people reach their emotional limit long before they reach honesty. They can offer you excuses, silence, or distraction, but never what you truly need: genuine acknowledgement, the apology you never received. This is not evidence of your lack of worth. It reveals their limitations. Their emotional capacity hit a ceiling long before they could bear responsibility. Jung discovered that a true apology demands more than words. It requires psychological integration, the ability to accept both light and shadow, good intentions as well as harmful actions, love as well as destructive power. But not all people reach this integration. Many remain stuck in psychological inflation, a state where the ego is so inflated it cannot tolerate any information that threatens its self-image. That is why their patterns repeat as long as they remain unconscious. But what happens when someone is determined to keep their patterns hidden? Jung's insights into unconscious structures can help you recognize them before you become trapped inside them. His final warning about this type of person offers you a key to protecting your peace. He identified the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate familiar patterns again and again, even when they are harmful. Those who harm without remorse do not make accidental mistakes. They follow an unconscious script that serves their psychological needs. Jung's research shows that these people deliberately choose environments that support their illusions. They surround themselves with agreeable friends, compliant partners, and people who never confront them. They build what Jung called psychological echo chambers, avoiding every chance for self-reflection. Because the moment they look into that mirror, their entire illusion begins to collapse. The illusion of being harmless, the illusion of having only done their best, the illusion that everyone else is simply too sensitive, too dramatic, or too needy. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." It is precisely this terror they spend their lives running from. They develop an unconscious competence in emotional avoidance. They hurt others, and in the very same moment, construct a psychological system that frees them from all responsibility. And here lies the most liberating truth Jung uncovered about difficult people, an insight that can release you from the endless cycle of waiting, hoping, and exhaustion. Jung saw clearly, you cannot make conscious someone who has chosen to remain unconscious. You cannot force acknowledgement from someone determined to avoid it at all costs. And you cannot love someone into maturity if they have chosen to remain emotionally immature. In his final reflections on human relationships, Jung came to this conclusion. The most radical act of self-love is to accept that some people will never give you what you truly need. It is not because you don't deserve it, it is simply because they are emotionally incapable of giving it. Their refusal to apologize, to take responsibility, or to acknowledge your suffering says nothing about your worth. It only reveals where they stand in their psychological development. Jung wrote that expecting responsibility from an emotionally unreachable person is like trying to draw water from a dry well. The well is not broken, it is simply empty. No matter how much love, patience, or persistence you give, water cannot appear where none exists. Carl Jung devoted his life to teaching people to embrace their shadow, to reach wholeness, and to meet themselves fully. But he emphasized one essential truth. This process is voluntary. Awareness can never be forced on anyone. Here lies the liberating truth for you. In relation to those who hurt you, and then acted as if nothing had happened, Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart." Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens, and those who hurt you remain trapped in their dreams, still projecting their shadows, still fleeing from self-reflection. Meanwhile, you have done the inner work. You have sought truth, responsibility, healing, and growth. You were awake in a relationship with someone who preferred to stay asleep. Jung's deepest teaching reminds us, Your healing is not tied to their awakening. Your closure does not depend on their awareness. Your peace does not need their agreement. Your worth does not require their recognition. The person who hurt you and pretended nothing happened knows exactly what they did. They remember everything, but they lack the psychological maturity to face the truth. Now you know your next step. Stop waiting for them to grow. Stop justifying your pain to those who benefit from ignoring it. Stop carrying the entire emotional burden in relationships where you are the only one doing the work. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But he also discovered, the greatest freedom comes when we accept others in their limitations, their unconsciousness, their refusal to grow. When you stop trying to wake the sleepers, you become free to build relationships with those who are already awake. When you stop expecting maturity from the emotionally immature, you create space for those who truly embody emotional intelligence. The goal is not to awaken everyone, but to cultivate enough awareness to protect your peace from those who avoid the inner path. This is the essence of shadow work: integration and freedom. Jung reminded us, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. Those who hurt you without remorse have in the same breath revealed your strength, your sense of worth, and your capacity to heal. They have shown you what you will no longer accept, clarified your deepest values, and reminded you that your peace is worth protecting. That is the hidden gift within the wound, the realization that you deserve relationships with people who reflect your emotional maturity, people who can endure discomfort, confront their shadows, and grow with you. The apology you never received was never about you. It was about their limitations, their low level of development, their choice to remain unconscious. Your healing, your growth, your freedom, all of it has everything to do with you. That is your true power. Jung said it most clearly. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you already know who you are, someone who embraces truth, seeks responsibility, values growth, healing, and genuine connection. And those are the kind of people you should have by your side. Do you believe healing comes from waiting for an apology or from creating peace within yourself? Write 1 if you are still holding space for apologies that never came. Write 2 if you have decided to move forward and invest in people who reflect your maturity. Thank you from the heart for joining me in this exploration. If this conversation has given you value, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing it with someone it might help.